Yeah, I think it's really interesting too. Journalist Seymour Hersh, he wrote an article recently revealing that it was actually the U.S. that blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. And he's received heavy criticism, as you can imagine, from mainstream media and from the White House press as well. But I want to remind people who Seymour Hersh is, because people tend to forget this, that he was actually the journalist that gained popularity after he published the story about the My Lai massacre, which was about there were U.S. troops in Vietnam and they were killing unarmed Vietnamese people. He broke that story. And back then, it seems like great renowned journalists, congratulations, so proud of you. But now it's like mainstream media and other journalists are smearing him because of the information he's revealing about the United States government this time around. But it seems like they didn't have that resentment towards him when he revealed that information. I mean, I wasn't alive back then, but that's what it seems like. I think some people don't understand this isn't someone who just became a journalist yesterday. He's won numerous awards and he's done great work. And the White House still really isn't addressing that article the way that they should. Other politicians have been approached and confronted about it, like Hakeem Jeffries. They don't want to talk about it. The only statement that I saw is they said it's utterly false and complete fiction, but they do not want to talk about this, Jill. And it is very revealing.
It sure is. And, you know, a case in point is that the UN Security Council just had a proposal. It was proposed by Russia that the UN investigate Nord Stream because this is an international crime. This is international terrorism. And for the UN and everybody else to just look the other way says, okay, you know, go ahead, anybody, blow up any underwater infrastructure. And those are like transcontinental cables. It's a lot of the internet. It's wind power. You know, they're kind of like saying, hey, it's just a thumbs up to any kind of sabotage of, you know, of infrastructure, you know, and this was like billions and billions worth of infrastructure. And they're not even, you know, trying to get to the bottom of it. So this proposal from Russia was met with, the vote is really revealing because it was Russia, China, and Brazil that supported it. Everybody else abstained. You know, what does that tell you about US strong arming? They don't like come out against it. Who in their right mind would be against it? But they were pressured, you know, presumably, you can be pretty sure they're all pressured not to vote for it. And why, you know, their reason for this, their public reason was that, oh, don't worry, because Denmark, I think Norway, maybe Germany, there are 3 countries that are already investigating it. Well, actually, their investigations are secret and they won't share the results of their investigation. So at every turn, you know, this is just an orchestrated scam to protect the perpetrator. Who would oppose an investigation of this most horrific act of terrorism that has resulted in energy shortage all over the world and escalating energy prices and therefore food prices? You know, this has been an absolute disaster, especially for the economy of Germany, which is now losing a lot of its businesses because it doesn't have energy to support them. This is a catastrophe for the economy, especially of Germany, but all of the EU. And who would like not want to know the answer to that? The only person who wouldn't want to know the answer is the culprit who did it. And we are doing everything we can to prevent the investigation from taking place. It's really such a blatant, you know, self-incrimination going on.
Yes, it is. Have you noticed any of the anti-Russia sentiment? I'm having flashbacks of a post 9/11 when there was an anti, you know, Islamic sentiment in this country after that. Now it seems like if you even people who work for like RT per se, journalists who are traveling to Russia to cover the story, people who are talking about the narrative a little bit differently, people who are Russian, like Americans, it seems like this is happening all over again, where there's like this anti Russia sentiment, and this is one of the problems with war as well. It gives the impression that, especially when the US government is involved, it gives the impression that the US government or NATO is in the right and the opposing country is the enemy. And regardless of the war, the US government tends to make it appear to be that the US government is actually the hero. We're on the good side, and the opposing country is to blame or is the enemy. And what tends to happen from that is that people who are from that country can be treated unfairly in this country or smeared. I mean, I'm seeing them call journalists Putin puppets who don't support the war at all. Medea Benjamin calling for, peace in Ukraine. They're smearing people who are calling for peace. They're calling them Putin puppets. I mean, people have really lost it. They really have. But it's scary because for me, I remember anti-Russia sentiment going all the way back to when I was a kid. It was always Russia bad, Russia's cold and angry. And you might know this here, but there's a facility here called the Maparium for people who are not aware. If you go to the Maparium, it's a giant globe, right, of the world. You walk into the globe and there's like this voice that speaks to you and talks about different countries. When it gets to Russia, all of a sudden music turns very cold and it goes, I'm like, what happened there? Like it's so negative when compared to how they talk about the other countries.
Yeah, it's so sad, and Russian artists are being canceled, and conductors, are having they're being fired and their concerts are being canceled in this country. Yeah, I mean, it's just McCarthyism all over. The media is certainly driving this. There's this public delusion that there's a good guy in a white hat and there's a bad guy in a black hat, and this is kind of how our corporate media works. And, it's really remarkable. I try to listen. My husband likes to watch PBS NewsHour, which makes me want to scream all the time. But I'm always listening to see, like, do they know what they're talking about? And the talking heads that they bring on, are they persuasive? And I have to say, they generally don't know what they're talking about, or they are kind of suspiciously funded in a way that, no one in their right mind would give them credence. And so you have the feeling that we just have this media apparatus which is doing its job, in my mind, there is a press doing the real work of journalism. There's a press, and then there's an oppress that's really oppressing people with their information warfare and their sense of loyalty and their career advancement aims, which is, again, what is being taught now a lot in journalism school, that you're supposed to, advance up the ladder. And I can't say all journalism schools are doing that. I don't, it's not a field I know very well, but this is certainly what I hear. And you see this in so many people who come out of journalism school that, I don't know, maybe because they have a debt to repay, they're looking for the good jobs so they can pay their student debt, and just abandon the principles of journalism, which is supposed to be about, what's the phrase? Comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. They've got it backwards. It's about comforting the comfortable and afflicting the afflicted. That's what they do in all realms, whether it's foreign policy or, or the economy or the climate. They're all about, playing the game. It's just this very primitive notion of it's like a football team, it's like a sports event, and you're just like loyal to your tribe. And so many of them, so many journalists, professional journalists now are coming from, solid upper classes and are coming from an economic elite. So they don't see it, they don't see the story to start with. And it becomes this very self-reinforcing crisis. And if you look at public polls again about what do people think about the media, and how do people, are people confident? Do they have trust in media? And absolutely they don't. It's down near single digits, maybe in the 10s or 20, at most. People are not trusting media and they feel like they've been abandoned, and our kind of public sentiment about the war is just a reflection of this very superficial and self-serving coverage by the elitist media.
I agree.
Go RBN, and people need to be listening to a real discussion, what we get from Aaron Mate or Glenn Greenwald, Gray Zone, just there's great alternative stuff out there, and you don't have to agree with it all. But, you ought to start trying to mix it up and actually trying to understand what's going on, and just don't take their word for it.